There is something moving behind our sun, something that nobody was ready for. An object hurtling through the void faster than anything our civilization has ever recorded has begun to defy the laws of physics as we know them. It is emitting a brilliant jet of gas, a plume of unknown material aimed with impossible precision directly at the heart of our solar system, directly at our sun. Comets, as you know, have tails that are pushed away from the sun by solar wind. This object does the opposite. They have given it a name, 3I/Atlas. It is the third interstellar visitor ever confirmed to have entered our cosmic neighborhood. The official word from NASA is that it's merely a comet, an ancient traveler of ice and rock making a temporary pass through our system. But comets don't behave this way. This visitor is ejecting nickel, a refined metallic compound never before witnessed occurring naturally in this state, while simultaneously venting a continuous, perfectly aimed stream of cyanide and carbon dioxide toward the sun's fiery surface. Just days before it vanished into the sun's blinding glare, the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter captured images of it. Those images, according to inside sources, have yet to be released to the public. And now, as 3I/Atlas reaches its perihelion, its closest and most intimate approach to the sun, no one on Earth can see what it is doing. Not a single telescope, not one of our most powerful cameras, can pierce the sun's veil. There is only silence, a profound, unnerving silence, punctuated by a chilling warning from a respected Harvard astrophysicist. If you want to take a vacation, take it before October 29, because who knows what will happen. So, what does this enigma, 3I/Atlas, want with our sun? Is it simply burning away, a celestial moth drawn too close to a cosmic flame? Is it refueling, drawing energy from our star for a journey we cannot possibly comprehend? Or is it performing an act of unimaginable scale and purpose, something we were never meant to witness? If you find this story as profoundly fascinating and deeply unsettling as I do, I want you to tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from, what time it is for you, and whether you believe we are being told the entire truth. Let's begin with what we know for certain, the cold, hard facts of the case. The object designated 3I/Atlas was first detected on the 1st of July, 2025. The discovery was made not by a human eye, but by an automated survey telescope in the barren, high-altitude deserts of Chile. It appeared initially as just another designation in a catalog of celestial bodies, a 111PL3Z, a blurry, faint moving against the static backdrop of distant stars, but it was moving at a speed that immediately flagged it as unusual. Within a breathtaking 48 hours, orbital calculations confirmed what astronomers had begun to suspect. This object was not from around here. It did not belong to our solar system. Its trajectory was traced back to the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, originating from somewhere near the dense, mysterious heart of our Milky Way galaxy. It was screaming through space at an astonishing 58 kilometers per second relative to our sun. To put that into perspective, that is more than double the velocity required to escape the sun's gravitational pull entirely. This simple fact meant its origin could not be local. It had to have been born in another star system, orbiting another sun, in another, distant world. This made it the third confirmed interstellar visitor, following the enigmatic Oumuamua in 2017 and the more conventional 2I/Borisov in 2019. But 3I/Atlas was immediately different from its predecessors in ways that seized the attention of the scientific community. Oumuamua had been a puzzle, small, incredibly dark, shaped like a cigar, and exhibiting a strange acceleration that couldn't be explained. It could have been a rock of a type we'd never seen, or, as some whispered, something else entirely. 2I/Borisov, on the other hand, was a perfectly well-behaved guest. It was a clear and unambiguous comet, a cosmic tourist that acted exactly as our models predicted, passing through our system without any fuss or incident. 3I/Atlas, however, defied easy categorization. It seemed to exist somewhere in the twilight between the natural and the unnatural. It possessed a coma, the signature cloud of gas and dust that envelopes the nucleus of a comet as it heats up. Early spectroscopic observations confirmed it was releasing carbon dioxide, cyanide, and trace amounts of water vapor, all standard ingredients for a comet. But the recipe was wrong. The proportions were unlike anything seen before. The ratio of carbon dioxide to water was an incredible 8-to-1, among the highest ever recorded. Most comets we know are rich in water ice. This one was mysteriously dry. And then there was its path. The trajectory itself was an anomaly that raised eyebrows. Objects hurtling from the void of interstellar space can approach our solar system from any direction, at any angle imaginable. They have no reason to conform to the neat, flat plane of our own system's architecture. Yet, 3IATLAS arrived on a path inclined at a mere 4.89 degrees from the ecliptic plane, the very plane in which Earth and most other planets orbit the Sun. It was an almost perfectly flat approach. The statistical probability of such an alignment occurring by random chance is vanishingly small, around 0.2%, or a 1 in 500 shot. While not impossible, it was certainly rare enough to be noted as a profound coincidence. But the coincidences didn't stop there. The object's path through our system was a grand tour of cosmic near misses. Its trajectory brought it unusually close to multiple planets, Mars, Venus, and even the colossal Jupiter. The odds of a single random trajectory featuring this sequence of close planetary encounters are staggeringly low, estimated at roughly 1 in every 20,000. It was Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb, a figure known for his brilliant but often controversial theories, who painstakingly calculated these probabilities. He began publishing papers, pointing out these statistical anomalies with academic caution. He tentatively suggested that perhaps the trajectory wasn't random at all. Perhaps it was engineered. Perhaps 3IATLAS was something far more than a simple, natural comet. As expected, the mainstream scientific community pushed back, and they pushed back hard. NASA's own Tom Statler, a prominent figure in planetary science, publicly dismissed the idea as absolute nonsense. Other leading astronomers accused Loeb of sensationalism and attention-seeking, arguing that comets are notoriously messy and unpredictable. They often display bizarre and unusual properties that we don't fully understand. And in a way, they were right. 3IATLAS did look like a comet. It was doing comet-like things. It had a coma. It was outgassing. By late August, it had even developed a faint, wispy tail. All of its behaviors were, on the surface, straight out of an astronomy textbook. Yet, the anomalies persisted. Small, nagging details that didn't quite fit the standard model. Individually, any one of them could be explained away as a peculiarity. But when taken together, they began to paint a picture of something far more complex, something we had not yet begun to understand. The estimates of its size, for instance, were in constant flux. Initial observations suggested it was a colossal 20 kilometers in diameter, an absolute monster for an interstellar visitor. This was later revised down to 10 kilometers, and then, using data from the Hubble Space Telescope, to a more modest 5.6 kilometers. But a perplexing contradiction arose when scientists calculated its mass. By tracking how the object's path was subtly altered by its own jets of gas, a way of weighing it by seeing how much it resisted being pushed, they arrived at a staggering figure. It weighed at least 33 billion tons. This was far too heavy for a 5-kilometer-wide chunk of porous ice and rock. The numbers didn't add up. Unless, of course, it wasn't a solid object. Unless there were vast, empty spaces inside it. Or unless it was made of something far denser than we could imagine. And then there was the timing, the final, and perhaps most unsettling, coincidence of all. 3IATLAS was calculated to reach its perihelion, its closest point to the Sun, on October 29, 2025. On that exact date, the planet Earth would be on the precise opposite side of the Sun. This alignment, known as solar conjunction, meant that every single telescope on our planet, every eye we could possibly use to watch it would be completely blinded. The sun itself would stand directly between us and the object during its most active, its most revealing, its most crucial moment. It would be a total observational blackout. Avi Loeb pointed out that this would be the absolute optimal time to perform a highly complex orbital maneuver. It's called a reverse solar Oberth maneuver. By using the sun's immense gravity combined with a perfectly timed engine burn, an object could shed its tremendous interstellar speed. It could brake, allowing itself to be captured into a stable, bound orbit around our sun. It could choose to stay here instead of leaving. And if 3IATLAS, or whatever intelligence might be guiding it, wanted to execute such a maneuver without being seen, this would be the perfect, clandestine opportunity. October 29th, hidden from every eye on Earth, performing an action we could not see, a maneuver that would change its destiny, and perhaps ours, forever. Which brings us back to the red planet. Back to Mars. While every telescope on Earth would be rendered blind during the perihelion of 3I/Atlas, Mars would have a front-row seat. On October 3, 2025, just a few weeks before its solar rendezvous, the interstellar visitor passed within 29 million kilometers of the red planet. In the vast emptiness of space, this is practically a stone's throw. It was a near miss of cosmic proportions. This proximity was a golden opportunity. It meant that the flotilla of 7 advanced spacecraft currently orbiting Mars, our robotic emissaries, could turn their sophisticated cameras and spectrometers toward the visitor. They could capture images and data at resolutions that Earth-based telescopes could only dream of. This was our one chance, our single, unmissable window to see 3I/Atlas up close before it disappeared behind the sun's curtain. One of these orbiters, NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, EMBRO, carries an instrument called HiRISE, the High-Resolution Imaging Science Experiment. It is one of the most powerful cameras ever sent into deep space, designed to photograph the Martian surface with enough detail to spot individual boulders and the tracks left by our rovers from hundreds of kilometers above. When aimed at 3I/Atlas from a distance of 29 million kilometers, HiRISE should have been able to resolve features down to about 30 kilometers across. While not enough to see surface details on a 5-kilometer nucleus, it would be more than enough to clearly separate the solid core from the ethereal, surrounding coma of gas and dust. It would give us a definitive size estimate and, crucially, reveal if there was anything unusual about its shape or structure. Simultaneously, the European Space Agency's ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter was positioned to perform detailed spectroscopy. By analyzing the light reflected and emitted by the comet, it could determine its chemical composition with unprecedented precision, potentially solving the mystery of the anomalous gas ratios. The United Arab Emirates Hope Orbiter and China's Tianwen-1 were also on hand, their instruments capable of contributing vital data. This was meant to be a coordinated, international observation campaign, planned months in advance. Every space agency involved knew the stakes. They knew this was a singular moment in scientific history. And then, on October 1st, just 2 days before this critical Mars flyby, the United States government shut down. Due to political gridlock, over 15,000 NASA employees were furloughed. The agency's public-facing websites stopped updating. All public communications abruptly ceased. According to the official statements, it was a case of bureaucratic paralysis striking at the worst possible moment. But here is where the official story begins to fray at the edges. The European Space Agency, ESA, is a completely separate, international body, entirely unaffected by American politics. They did release their images from the flyby on October 7th, 4 days after the event. But what they showed was profoundly disappointing. The images were nothing more than fuzzy, indistinct white dots moving against a field of stars. There was no detail, no structure. Frankly, they told us nothing we didn't already know. The official explanation was a technical one. The ESA's cameras were optimized for photographing the bright, nearby surface of Mars, not a faint, distant object tens of millions of kilometers away. The comet was between 10,000 and 100,000 times fainter than their usual targets. They did their best, they claimed, with inadequate equipment. Fair enough. But NASA's HiRISE camera was a different story. It was built for this kind of challenge. Its angular resolution, even at that vast distance, would have been more than 10 times better than anything the ESA could achieve. If any instrument in our entire arsenal could reveal the true nature of 3I/Atlas, it was HiRISE. And HiRISE was operational. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, its host spacecraft, continued its normal functions throughout the entirety of the U.S. government shutdown. Data from other Mars assets, like the Perseverance rover, continued to be transmitted and even uploaded to public servers during this period. So, the crucial question remains unanswered. Why were the HiRISE images of 3I/Atlas never released? The government shutdown excuse begins to feel less like a genuine explanation and more like a conveniently timed cover story. This suspicion deepens when you realize that China's Tianwen-1 orbiter also went mysteriously silent about its own observations. The UAE's Hope orbiter, which should have captured excellent spectroscopic data on the comet's strange chemical makeup, released nothing. Think about the implications. We have multiple sovereign governments, with entirely separate space agencies, different bureaucracies, and competing national priorities, all simultaneously becoming unable or unwilling to share their best data on what was arguably the most scientifically significant object to visit our solar system in years. The pattern is difficult to ignore. It suggests a coordinated silence. And it was into this vacuum of official information that amateur astronomers began to find things on their own. On October 3rd, the very same day as the Mars flyby, a Portuguese amateur astronomer, operating online under the username Dobsonian_Power, uploaded an image to a public forum that immediately went viral. He had used nothing more than a solar telescope in his own backyard, equipment not even designed for deep space observation, combined with aggressive digital enhancement techniques. What he captured was a hazy, indistinct image of 3I/Atlas. But within that digital fuzz, he claimed to see something extraordinary: structure. He pointed to dark, geometric shapes, angular protrusions, features that simply did not match the typical, diffuse glow of a comet's coma. His caption was simple and chilling. "What on earth is it?" Within 6 hours, the image had been shared across every major astronomy forum, subreddit, and social media platform. The reaction was immediate and polarizing, splitting the online community into two distinct camps. One group saw this as undeniable proof of artificiality, the smoking gun that proved 3I/Atlas was not the natural object that mainstream science claimed it to be. The other group dismissed it as a classic case of pareidolia, the innate human tendency to perceive patterns and familiar shapes in random noise, amplified by the use of inappropriate equipment and flawed image processing. The debunkers had strong technical arguments on their side. Solar telescopes are built with specialized filters designed to handle the sun's extreme brightness, making them fundamentally unsuited for observing faint, fast-moving deep space objects. When you add aggressive digital processing to try and compensate for this inadequate setup, you are essentially asking an algorithm to invent details that aren't really there. But this is where the story grows more complex. Dobsonian_Power was not some random internet troll with a cheap telescope and an overactive imagination. He is a respected member of the amateur astronomy community who has been sharing legitimate, high-quality astrophotography work for over a decade. His online channels feature meticulous documentation of his equipment, his methods, and his image processing workflows. This was not a person known for manufacturing evidence for clicks or attention. When pressed about the anomalous structures in his 3I/Atlas image, he didn't double down with wild, sensational claims. Instead, he expressed caution and acknowledged the uncertainty. He promised to try observing the object again when it became visible from Earth in early November, after it passed behind the sun. His response was measured, scientific, and appropriately skeptical. which made the official reaction to his image all the more telling. Within 24 hours, multiple science news websites published articles specifically debunking his photograph. Headlines like "Amateur Telescope Captures Strange 3I/Atlas Image. Here's Why It's Not What It Seems" began to appear. The timing of this response felt coordinated. The tone felt defensive, almost preemptive, as if an official narrative needed to be quickly established, that nothing unusual had been photographed, and that any apparent anomalies were merely technical artifacts. It felt like an attempt to control the story before the image could gain too much traction. And then, the enhancement wars began. Across the internet, users started downloading the original, low-resolution images released by the ESA and running them through their own processing algorithms. Some used standard astronomical techniques, like image stacking. Others employed sophisticated AI upscaling tools designed to enhance low-resolution photographs. A few went even further, using experimental machine learning models trained to reconstruct fine details from limited data. The results were a chaotic and contradictory mess. Some enhanced images showed nothing but slightly sharper versions of the same fuzzy dot. But others revealed what appeared to be distinct geometric patterns, sharp edges, and structures that seemed far too regular to be the product of natural ice and rock formation. The fundamental problem is that once you begin to aggressively process an image, especially with AI, you are no longer looking at what is actually there. You are looking at what an algorithm thinks should be there based on its training data. If you train an AI on thousands of images of satellites and spacecraft, and then ask it to enhance a blurred, it might very well invent details that look like a spacecraft, because that's the pattern it has learned to recognize. It's a scientific dead end, wrapped in the alluring illusion of clarity. But the proliferation of these enhanced images had an unintended, and perhaps deliberate, effect. They muddied the waters so thoroughly that it became nearly impossible for a layperson to distinguish between legitimate amateur observations and outright fabrications. Within 48 hours of the ESA photo release, dozens of supposedly enhanced versions were circulating. Some depicted metallic surfaces glinting in the sun. Others showed what looked like vast solar panels or complex antenna arrays. A few even went so far as to include running lights and visible thruster plumes. Most were obvious fakes, digital art created by talented people with too much time and skill in Photoshop. But mixed in with this flood of noise were a handful of images that felt different. They were more subtle, less sensational. They showed just enough unusual regularity to make you wonder if something real was being deliberately obscured by a flood of obvious hoaxes. And then, on October 4th, something else appeared from a much darker corner of the internet. An anonymous user on the infamous online forum 4chan posted what they claimed was insider information about 3I/Atlas. The post appeared on the site's paranormal board, a place known for conspiracy theories and creative fiction. The post was titled simply, "ESA Data Leak." It began with a claim of credentials, specific enough to sound plausible, but vague enough to maintain anonymity. "I am a doctoral researcher working with the European Space Agency, with continuous access to the combined observational data of 3I/Atlas. Internet leaks are a dime a dozen, and most are easily dismissed as trolling or elaborate hoaxes. But this one was different. The level of technical detail it contained was deeply unsettling. The poster didn't make wild claims about alien invasions or secret government cover-ups. Instead, they laid out a series of specific, observational anomalies that, if true, would fundamentally challenge our entire understanding of what 3I/Atlas actually is. The first anomaly they described was a chemical impossibility. According to the post, detailed spectroscopic analysis from the Mars flyby showed that 3I/Atlas was releasing approximately 100 kilograms of nickel gas every single second. But it was doing so with almost no corresponding iron emission. In every known model of stellar and planetary chemistry, nickel and iron are inseparable twins. They are forged together in the hearts of dying stars. They travel together through the interstellar medium, and they appear together in every comet and asteroid we have ever studied. To find an abundance of nickel with virtually no iron is like finding smoke without a fire. It violates the basic, fundamental assumptions of how matter behaves in any natural cosmic environment. The second anomaly was a thermal contradiction. The object was observed to be releasing massive quantities of gas and dust, the characteristic signature of an active comet being intensely heated by the sun. But, the post claimed, infrared observations showed that the object's nucleus remained inexplicably cold, far colder than it should be given its rate of outgassing and its proximity to the sun's radiation. The poster used a chilling analogy. It was like watching someone sweat profusely while standing inside a freezer. The observed physics simply did not match the observed reality. The third anomaly concerned the object's trajectory precision. The post referenced what the astrophysicist Avi Loeb had already been saying publicly, that 3I/Atlas had arrived with an unusually flat orbital inclination. But the 4chan poster added a detail that Loeb had not emphasized. The trajectory wasn't just unusual, it was a perfect, straight shot from the direction of the galactic core. There was no wobble, no deviation, no evidence of the slight gravitational perturbations it should have experienced from passing near other stars during its journey of millions or even billions of years through interstellar space. It was as if, the poster suggested, it had been aimed. Then came the part of the post that elevated it from interesting scientific speculation to something far darker. The anonymous researcher claimed that the object perfectly fit the profile of what they termed a post-biological entity. It was not a natural comet, but it was also not a conventional spacecraft as we would understand it. It was something in between. They described it as having a three-phase particle engine with an estimated continuous power output of 75 megawatts. They claimed it was transmitting an active signal and was, in their own terrifying words, probing our solar system. The post concluded with a theoretical framework that sent shockwaves through the communities that study these topics. The poster suggested that 3I/Atlas might be a macroscopic quantum object, specifically something known as a cue ball. This is a highly exotic, theoretical construct from the fringes of particle physics, a type of non-topological soliton that could, in theory, exist at scales far larger than subatomic particles. If stable, a cue ball could possess properties that seem utterly impossible under the laws of normal physics. It could be incredibly dense while appearing diffuse and ethereal. It could absorb and redistribute energy instantaneously across its entire structure, which would explain the baffling thermal contradictions. It could even, potentially, explain the nickel without iron problem, if the cue ball's internal quantum state preferentially produces certain isotopes over others. Within 18 hours, screenshots of the post had been shared across Reddit, Twitter, and numerous dedicated UFO research forums. A thread discussing it on the main conspiracy subreddit accumulated over 2,000 comments before the moderators abruptly locked it, citing rules against unverified claims. But locking the thread didn't stop the conversation. It simply fractured it, sending it scattering across other platforms. The discussion split into dozens of parallel threads, each pulling the original post's claims in different directions. Some focused on the chemical anomalies, others zeroed in on the mind-bending cue ball hypothesis. A few even began connecting it to earlier astronomical mysteries, suggesting that 3I/Atlas might be the source of the famous 1977 WOW signal. And this is where the story gets truly interesting. Because while the 4chan post was clearly speculative, mixing legitimate scientific concepts with wild and proven theoretical physics, some of its core claims were actually verifiable. The nickel without iron observation, for instance, could be checked against previously published spectroscopic data. And when people started to dig, they found something astonishing. The European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope had indeed published observations on August 21st confirming the presence of nickel in the coma of 3I/Atlas. And buried within that scientific paper was an explicit note about the unusual absence of iron, which typically accompanies nickel in cometary emissions. The anonymous 4chan poster had been right about that one, highly specific, technical detail, which made people wonder, what else might they be right about? On October 4th, as the internet was still reeling from the 4chan leak, NASA's Perseverance rover, sitting in the dusty expanse of Jezero crater on the Martian surface, captured something in the night sky above. The image, taken by its right navigation camera, showed an elongated, pencil-thin streak of light, roughly 4 times longer than it was wide. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable. It looked like a typical long-exposure photograph of a moving celestial object. Comets and asteroids often appear smeared or streaked in images when the camera is set to track the background stars instead of the object itself. It was standard, textbook astrophotography. Except, the math didn't work. When amateur analysts and astronomers started to calculate the apparent size of that streak based on the Perseverance rover's known camera specifications and the distance to 3IATLAS at that exact moment, they arrived at a disturbing, almost unbelievable number. The streak was 50,000 kilometers long. That is not a comet nucleus. That is not even a comet with a tail. That is something else entirely. For a sense of scale, the entire diameter of our planet Earth is less than 13,000 kilometers. If this streak represented the actual physical size of 3I/Atlas, we were looking at an object nearly 4 times wider than our own world. Social media exploded with frantic speculation. Was 3I/Atlas in fact a massive, cylindrical craft? Had it been concealing its true size and shape all this time, hiding behind a cleverly maintained, diffuse cloud of gas and dust? The timing felt deeply significant. This image emerged just one day after the Mars flyby, at the exact time when all the professional space agencies with their powerful orbiters had gone mysteriously quiet. Some saw it as confirmation that something deeply anomalous had been photographed, something that couldn't be so easily explained away by official sources. The speculation reached such a fever pitch that a sitting member of the United States House of Representatives, Anna Paulina Luna, who is known for her interest in unexplained aerial phenomena, UAP, felt compelled to reach out directly to Harvard physicist Avi Loeb for his analysis. Think about that for a moment. A member of the U.S. Congress was so concerned that she bypassed the usual NASA communication channels to get an expert interpretation of a photograph taken by a rover on Mars. That is not normal protocol. That suggests that someone in an official capacity was worried enough to seek an outside opinion. Loeb's response was thorough and, on the surface, reassuring. He carefully calculated that the Perseverance navigation camera has an angular resolution that, at the 38 million kilometer distance to 3I/Atlas, translates to about 12,500 kilometers per pixel. The streak in the image spanned roughly 4 pixels, which gives you that almost unbelievable 50,000 kilometer length. But, Loeb argued, this was almost certainly an artifact of composite imaging. The streak wasn't showing the actual size of the object itself. It was showing the path the object traced across the Martian sky during a long integration time, likely a series of stacked exposures lasting around 10 minutes. His reasoning was solid. Mars orbits the Sun at 24 kilometers per second. 3I/Atlas was traveling at 67 kilometers per second relative to the Sun, but in the opposite direction, giving it a staggering relative velocity of over 90 kilometers per second compared to Mars. Over a 10-minute period, that movement would trace a path of exactly 54,000 kilometers across the sky, a figure that perfectly matched the observed length of the streak. The shape wasn't the object. It was the object's motion, smeared across time. Case closed, right? The massive cylinder theory had been debunked by basic physics and careful math. Except, Loeb included one crucial sentence in his analysis, a single qualifier that conspiracy theorists and online sleuths latched onto like a lifeline. He wrote, "If the navcam images represent single snapshots with an exposure time below 3.28 seconds, then the brightness and angular length of the observed source imply that it is not 3I/Atlas. In that case, the source might be much closer to the camera, capable of being smeared into an elongated image with a smaller spatial size and a smaller speed. Wait, let that sink in. If these were quick snapshots rather than long exposures, then what the Perseverance rover photographed was not 3I/Atlas at all. It was something else. Something much, much closer to Mars. Something near the rover itself. That single sentence opened a door of possibility that no amount of subsequent clarification could ever fully close. Because, to this day, NASA has not confirmed whether the image is a composite or a single frame. They have not released the crucial metadata. They have not provided the exposure time or the number of stacked images. The official excuse, once again, was the government shutdown. There was no staff available to process the requests, no one to confirm the basic technical details of how the image was captured. And so, the question hangs there, suspended and unanswered in the thin Martian air. What did Perseverance actually photograph on October 4th? The phrase first began to appear in the titles of YouTube videos around October 7th, just as the European Space Agency was releasing its blurry, disappointing images from the Mars flyby. The titles were sensational, designed for clicks. 3I/Atlas is building something on Mars. Leaked images reveal what it's building on Mars. Mars rover exposes 3I/Atlas cylindrical structure. The truth is alarming. The videos were obvious clickbait, but they were tapping into a very real and growing pattern of speculation that had been building across multiple online platforms. It was a narrative fed by the glaring absence of official data and fueled by the presence of numerous, small, unexplained details. The theory, in its most coherent and compelling form, went something like this. 3I/Atlas is not just a passive visitor passing through our solar system. Its trajectory, which brought it closer to Mars than any other interstellar object has come to any planet in recorded history, was not random. It was purposeful. And during that close approach, while it was conveniently hidden from the prying eyes of Earth, the object either deployed something toward the Martian surface or interacted with something that was already there. The evidence cited for this incredible claim was a tapestry woven from all the anomalies we've discussed. It included the mysterious streak photographed by the Perseverance rover, which might show an object much closer to Mars than 3I/Atlas itself. It included the amateur observations showing unusual, geometric structures within the comet's coma. It included the coordinated, inexplicable silence from multiple international space agencies. And it included a re-examination of older, previously dismissed anomalies that had been photographed by Mars rovers over the years. Anomalies that had been written off as mere rocks or imaging artifacts, but which, when re-examined in this new context, showed a disturbing geometric regularity. And then there were the towers. Years earlier, in 2015, a Mars rover had photographed something in the distance that looked for all the world like a tall, vertical structure rising from the flat Martian landscape. At the time, NASA had identified it as a natural rock formation, likely sculpted by millions of years of wind erosion. Its resemblance to an artificial tower was dismissed as another case of pareidolia. But now, amateur analysts, poring over vast archives of public Mars imagery, claim to have found multiple such vertical structures, particularly in a region known as Terra Meridiani. Some of these structures appeared to be several kilometers tall. When these images were enhanced and measurements were attempted, the structures seemed to maintain a consistent spacing, as if they had been arranged in a deliberate pattern. Once again, NASA's official explanation was geological. They were wind-carved features known as yardongs, or unusual layered rock formations standing at odd angles. The Martian surface, they reminded us, is full of strange and exotic geology that can look artificial under the right lighting conditions. But now, with 3I/Atlas making its dramatic and precisely timed pass by Mars, these old anomalies were being revisited with fresh, suspicious eyes. Were they really just rocks? Or had something been quietly building on Mars for a long, long time? And was the arrival of 3I/Atlas somehow connected to that construction? The speculation reached a fever pitch when users on various forums began claiming that they had downloaded critical images from NASA's databases just before the government shutdown cut off public access. These images, they alleged, showed clear evidence of construction equipment, geometric foundations, and mechanical structures rising from the Martian regolith. The vast majority of these leaked images were quickly proven to be fakes, digital art, or photoshopped composites. But they spread across conspiracy forums and UFO research groups like wildfire anyway. Each time they were shared, new layers of interpretation and analysis were added, building a powerful, self-reinforcing narrative. The story that emerged from this collaborative speculation was surprisingly coherent. In this telling, 3I/Atlas is not a natural comet. It is a carrier, a mothership of some kind. It didn't approach Earth, the planet teeming with intelligent life, but Mars, the quiet, dusty, seemingly dead world next door. During its closest approach on October 3rd, it deployed something, a lander, construction drones, or perhaps even seeds for some larger, self-replicating structure. This, the theory goes, is why all the space agencies went silent. They saw it happen. They photographed it happening. And now, they are scrambling behind the scenes, trying to figure out what to do about it, what to tell the public, and how to manage the single greatest revelation in human history, that we are not alone, and that something is actively building infrastructure on the planet right next to ours. Is any of this true? Almost certainly not. The evidence is thin, speculative, and built upon a foundation of coincidences and misinterpreted imaging artifacts. Most of the so-called leaked images are demonstrably fake. The overwhelming scientific consensus remains that 3I/Atlas is a natural, if somewhat unusual, interstellar comet. But the fact that this narrative exists at all, that it has gained so much traction and is so compelling to so many people, tells us something deeply important. It tells us that people do not trust the official story. They see the gaps in the data, the conveniently timed shutdowns, the coordinated silence from supposedly independent agencies, and they fill those gaps with speculation. And in the absolute absence of transparency from those in power, that speculation will inevitably grow wilder, more elaborate, and more divorced from evidence-based reasoning. Which brings us to the real, underlying question of this entire affair. Why hasn't more data been released? There is another, deeper layer to this story that makes the timing of the arrival of 3I/Atlas feel even more uncanny, almost scripted. On August 15, 1977, nearly half a century ago, Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope detected a powerful 72-second burst of radio energy from deep space. The signal was so unusual, so perfectly structured, and so unlike any natural phenomenon known to science that the astronomer on duty, Jerry Emmon, circled the data on the computer printout and wrote a single word in the margin in red pen. Wow. For almost 5 decades, that wow signal has remained one of the greatest and most tantalizing mysteries in the scientific search for extraterrestrial intelligence. It came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, near its dense star fields. It was a narrowband signal, meaning it was focused at one very specific frequency, a hallmark of an artificial transmitter. And, most frustratingly, it has never, ever repeated. Astronomers have spent hundreds of hours of follow-up observation time, thousands of hours of listening, pointing our most powerful radio telescopes at that same region of the sky. The result has always been the same. Nothing. Just that one, powerful burst 48 years ago, and then an eternal, unbroken silence. Until the astrophysicist Avi Loeb ran the numbers on 3I/Atlas. He performed a simple but brilliant calculation. He backtracked the object's trajectory to find out where it was on August 12, 1977, just 3 days before the WOW signal was detected. The answer was that it was approximately 600 astronomical units from Earth, or about 600 times the distance between the Earth and the Sun. But more importantly, he calculated the direction it was coming from at that time. Its coordinates were a right ascension of 19 hours and 40 minutes and a declination of -19 degrees. The WOW signal had originated from a right ascension of 19 hours and 25 minutes and a declination of -27 degrees. In the vast, three-dimensional emptiness of space, those two positions are separated by a mere 9 degrees. Given that a random interstellar object could come from literally any direction on the celestial sphere, the probability of this close an alignment is about 0.6%. Not impossible, but deeply, deeply suspicious. Loeb didn't stop there. He asked the next logical question. If 3I/Atlas did send the WOW signal from 600 astronomical units away, how powerful would its transmitter have needed to be? The math is surprisingly straightforward. The detected intensity of the signal was between 54 and 212 Janskis. At that distance, this corresponds to a transmitter output of between half a gigawatt and 2 gigawatts. For reference, a typical nuclear power reactor on Earth produces about 1 gigawatt of power. So, we are talking about an object capable of focusing the energy output of a nuclear power plant into a narrow, targeted radio beam. This is not impossible for an advanced civilization. In fact, it's quite a reasonable power level if you are trying to send a detectable signal across interstellar distances without wasting enormous amounts of energy on an omnidirectional broadcast. There's another detail that makes this connection even harder to dismiss. The WOW signal was observed at a frequency that was slightly blue-shifted, indicating that the source was moving toward us. 3I/Atlas is, of course, currently moving toward us as it approaches the Sun. Loeb speculates that if this object has maneuvering capability, it might have been moving slower back in 1977 and then accelerated after its initial ping detected signs of a technologically advanced civilization in our solar system. The signal could have been a reconnaissance pulse, a form of interstellar radar, checking for a response before committing to a closer and more resource-intensive approach. Here's what makes this entire tantalizing connection so incredibly frustrating. It would be trivially easy to check. All we have to do is point a radio telescope at 3I/Atlas and listen. If it is transmitting, we will know within hours. If it is silent, then the WOW signal connection is probably just another incredible coincidence. It's a simple test that could provide a definitive answer. And yet, as Loeb himself has noted with increasing frustration in his public writings, not a single major radio telescope has reported any data on 3I/Atlas. The Very Large Array in New Mexico has not looked. The Arecibo telescope, our most powerful ear, was tragically destroyed. The Green Bank telescope has not published any observations. Even the SETI Institute, the organization literally dedicated to the search for extraterrestrial signals, has not publicly announced any monitoring efforts. The silence from the radio astronomy community is, in its own way, as deafening as the original silence that followed the WOW signal. Now, to be fair, there could be practical reasons for this. Telescope time is expensive and highly competitive, and most facilities are booked months or even years in advance. The connection to the WOW signal might seem too tenuous and speculative to justify bumping other, long-planned projects. Or, perhaps, they have looked, found nothing, and simply decided there was nothing newsworthy to report. Or, and this is the most unsettling possibility, perhaps they have looked, and they have found something, and they are now trying to figure out what it means and what to do before going public. We simply don't know, because they haven't told us. And into that silence, speculation grows. If 3I/Atlas is the source of the WOW signal, then it has been aware of our existence for at least 48 years. It has been watching, listening, and moving slowly but deliberately toward our home. And now it's here. October 29th, 2025. That is the date upon which this entire, sprawling mystery hinges. It's the day that 3I/Atlas reaches its perihelion, its point of closest approach to the Sun, and simultaneously disappears from our view behind the blinding glare of our star. And according to physicists like Avi Loeb, this isn't just an inconvenient gap in our observations. It is potentially the most critical moment of this entire encounter. When an object reaches perihelion, it is at the absolute apex of its gravitational dance with a star. It's the point where the sun's gravity is at its most powerful, where the object's velocity is at its highest, and where the curvature of its trajectory is at its sharpest. And if you are piloting a spacecraft and you want to make a major change to your orbit, if you want to slow down, speed up, or alter your course, this is the precise moment you do it. A small amount of thrust applied at perihelion results in the biggest possible change to your final trajectory. This fundamental principle of orbital mechanics is known as the Oberth effect, and it is something every spacecraft designer knows and uses. Normally, we use the Oberth effect to gain speed. You fire your engines when you're moving fastest, when you're at your closest point to a massive body like the sun or a planet, because that is when the kinetic energy you add has the most profound impact. Every probe we have ever sent to the outer solar system, Pioneer, Voyager, New Horizons, has used this principle, performing gravitational assists and carefully timed engine burns at their closest approaches to gain the speed needed to reach their distant destinations. But the effect also works in reverse. You can use it to slow down. You can use it to brake, to bleed off orbital velocity, and allow gravity to capture you into a bound, stable orbit instead of letting you continue on a hyperbolic escape trajectory. This is called a reverse Oberth maneuver, and it is exactly what an interstellar probe would do if it wanted to transition from simply passing through a star system to staying in it permanently. 3I/Atlas is currently on a hyperbolic trajectory. This means it is moving faster than the sun's escape velocity. It is destined to swing around our star and then head back out into the cold, dark void of interstellar space, never to return. Unless something changes. Unless it executes a braking maneuver at perihelion. And the timing of this perihelion is, as we've noted, remarkable. On October 29th, the exact moment that 3I/Atlas reaches this critical point in its orbit, the planet Earth will be on the precise opposite side of the sun. We will be in a state of solar conjunction. The sun will be a massive, blinding shield, standing directly between us and the comet, its glare making any observation from Earth utterly impossible. Even our most powerful space telescopes, like Hubble and the James Webb Space Telescope, which aren't affected by daylight, will struggle. It is nearly impossible to image a faint object when it is that close to the brilliant, chaotic solar disk. Avi Loeb describes this alignment as a hidden vantage point. If you were an alien intelligence designing a trajectory that allowed you to make a major, unobserved course correction, this would be it. You would time your arrival at perihelion for the exact moment when the planet with the most advanced telescopes, the planet with the most interest in tracking you, is on the far side of the star. You would make your move while no one is watching. Is this intentional? Is it a deliberate, calculated maneuver? Or is it just another coincidence in a long, ever-growing string of coincidences? The probabilities are low. If you were to take the trajectory of 3I/Atlas and vary its arrival time by just a few days or weeks, the odds of Earth being in that exact position on the opposite side of the sun are slim, perhaps 1 in 20. It's just another improbable thing, stacked on top of all the other improbable things. But here is what makes this moment particularly significant. If 3I/Atlas does execute a maneuver on October 29th, if it fires an engine or deploys some unknown propulsion system to slow down and capture itself into a solar orbit, we will not know about it immediately. We will only find out weeks later, when it re-emerges from behind the sun in late November or early December. At that point, when we are able to take new measurements and recalculate its trajectory, the change will be obvious. If the orbit has changed, if 3I/Atlas is no longer on an escape path, but is instead on a new, elliptical orbit that will keep it within our solar system, we will know that something happened. We will have definitive proof that a maneuver occurred, but we won't know exactly when it happened, or how, or what kind of propulsion was used. All we will have is the before and after, the trajectory it had going in, and the new trajectory it has coming out. Avi Loeb calculates that if 3I/Atlas does capture itself into a bound orbit, it could then maneuver its way to Earth's vicinity relatively quickly. The timeline he suggests is a closest approach to our planet in late November to early December. This would not be close in the sense of a collision. It would still be millions of kilometers away, but it would be close enough for us to get a much better view of it than we have now. And that, of course, raises the terrifying question of intent. If 3I/Atlas is a piece of technology, if it is a probe or a spacecraft of some kind, what would it want? What would be the purpose of staying in our solar system instead of just passing through? One possibility is simple observation. A probe designed to study inhabited worlds would want to stick around. It would want to settle into a stable orbit at a distance where it could monitor our radio transmissions, watch for the chemical signatures of our industries, and track the movements of our spacecraft and satellites. It would want to gather data over months or even years, building a complete and detailed picture of the civilization it has found. Another possibility is resource gathering. Our solar system is rich in useful materials: water ice on comets and moons, metal-rich asteroids, and rare isotopes like helium-3 in the atmospheres of the gas giants. An advanced, spacefaring civilization might send out probes to catalog the resources in nearby star systems, identifying targets for future exploitation or colonization. Or, the purpose could be far more defensive and far more sinister. A probe that detects the technological signatures of an emerging intelligent life form might be programmed to eliminate it before it can become a threat. This is the dark forest scenario, a concept from science fiction that Avi Loeb often references in his work. It's the idea that revealing your existence to other civilizations is inherently dangerous because you can never know their intentions. Therefore, the safest survival strategy is to destroy any emerging intelligence you encounter before it develops the capability to threaten you. Loeb is always careful to say that he is not predicting this. He is not claiming that 3I/Atlas is a weapon or that we are in imminent danger. But he is saying that if we do detect something that appears to be technological, we must assess the full range of possibilities, including hostile ones. We cannot afford to simply assume benign intent. The good news, if you can call it that, is that we will have some warning. If 3I/Atlas does decide to stay in our solar system, if it captures itself into a stable orbit and begins to maneuver toward Earth, we will see it coming. We will have weeks, or perhaps months, to observe it, to try to communicate with it, to figure out what it is doing and what it wants. That is a very different scenario from a surprise arrival with no time to react. But the window for that crucial observation is narrow. From late November, when 3I/Atlas is predicted to re-emerge from the sun's glare, until late December, when it would make its closest approach to Earth, we may have only 4 to 6 weeks. And during that critical time, we need to be watching constantly. We need every telescope, every spacecraft, every sensor we possess pointed directly at it. We need to coordinate all of our assets, from NASA's Juno probe orbiting Jupiter to the ESA's JUICE spacecraft, pooling all the data to ensure that we do not miss a single detail. Because if October 29th is the moment that everything changes, if that is the day that 3I/Atlas decides to stay, then we need to be ready for whatever comes next. And right now, we are not. We don't have a plan. We don't have an organization responsible for handling this scenario. We don't even have a consensus on whether we should be worried. The revelation that a sentinel was now in orbit around Mars changed the entire dynamic of the situation. Humanity was no longer just a passive observer of a cosmic curiosity. We were now neighbors to a silent, active, and utterly unknown technological presence. The main flotilla, 3I/Atlas, was on its long, looping path that would take it out towards Jupiter, but its child remained, a fixed point of alien intelligence just one planet away. The world's governments, forced out of their policy of silence, entered a new phase of frantic, behind-the-scenes activity. A unified, global response was impossible. National interests, old rivalries, and deep-seated paranoia fractured any attempt at a coordinated plan. Instead, a new, clandestine space race began. The objective was no longer to get to Mars for science or colonization, but to get there to investigate, to get a closer look at the Martian satellite. The United States, China, and a newly formed European consortium all fast-tracked previously planned missions and began designing new, dedicated probes. These were not the slow, scientifically minded orbiters of the past. These were rapid-response intercept missions. Small, agile spacecraft designed to be launched on the most powerful rockets available, their sole purpose to rendezvous with the alien satellite, to image it in high resolution, to analyze its transmissions, and to understand its capabilities. The timelines were impossibly aggressive. They were trying to accomplish in months what usually takes years or even decades. The public was told these were urgent missions to further study Martian atmospheric phenomena or to test new orbital mechanics, thin pretexts that fooled no one. While the superpowers raced to build their interceptors, the scientific community focused on the two things they could study: the main 3IATLAS flotilla and the signals coming from the Mars satellite. The James Webb Space Telescope was retasked, its powerful mirror now dedicated almost exclusively to observing the main object as it receded from the Sun. The new data was astonishing. The resolution was now high enough to confirm the leaked information. It was indeed a primary body surrounded by smaller, self-propelled objects. The coma was confirmed to be, at least partially, an artificial screen. Spectroscopic analysis of the thruster plumes from the smaller objects showed they were using a form of propulsion we didn't recognize, one that seemed to be manipulating electromagnetic fields to accelerate particles, explaining the weird nickel signature without requiring a physical engine as we understood it. Meanwhile, every radio telescope on Earth and every dish in orbit was now pointed at Mars, straining to decipher the conversation between the Sentinel and its parent craft. The signal was incredibly complex, a dense weave of data on multiple frequencies. At first, it seemed like random noise. But teams of cryptographers, linguists, and AI specialists from around the world, collaborating in an unprecedented, open-source effort, began to find patterns. They couldn't understand the content, but they could see the structure. It was a language, a highly mathematical, deeply logical language. There were repeating phrases, call-and-response patterns, and blocks of data that seemed to correlate with the orbital position of the Sentinel and the activity on the Martian surface below it. It appeared the satellite was conducting a detailed survey. It was scanning the planet, not just its surface, but deep beneath the crust, using some form of advanced ground-penetrating radar. The data packets it was sending back to 3IATLAS seemed to be maps. Detailed, three-dimensional maps of Mars's interior. The old theories about towers and construction were revisited with chilling new relevance. Was it looking for something? Or was it mapping out a site for future use? The transmissions were a one-way street of information. We were eavesdropping on a conversation we couldn't comprehend, about actions we couldn't see. Months turned into a year. The first of the human interceptor probes, a small, hastily built American craft named Star Eater, was launched in a blaze of publicity and patriotic fervor. Its journey to Mars would take 7 months. 7 more months of waiting, of watching the alien satellites circle Mars, of listening to its cryptic transmissions. The global mood was a strange and volatile mix of terror and exhilaration. The knowledge that we were not alone had shattered religions, upended economies, and forged new political alliances. Humanity was more unified and more divided than ever before. As Star Eater made its long journey, the main 3IATLAS flotilla continued its own majestic tour of our outer solar system. In March of 2026, as predicted, it made its closest approach to Jupiter. And it did something completely unexpected. As it passed the gas giant, it didn't just use Jupiter's gravity for a slingshot maneuver, as our own probes do. It dipped deep into the planet's upper atmosphere, skimming the turbulent cloud tops for several hours. When it emerged, its velocity had increased significantly, but more importantly, its chemical signature had changed. It had been refueling, scooping up hydrogen and helium from Jupiter's vast reserves. This was not a passive object. This was a thinking, planning, resource-gathering entity. It was preparing for the next leg of its journey, wherever that might lead. The news of the Jupiter maneuver sent a fresh wave of panic through the halls of power on Earth. This confirmed that 3IATLAS was not just here to stay. It was capable of living off the land, of using our solar system's own resources to sustain itself. It was self-sufficient. This made the mission of the Star Eater probe all the more critical. Understanding the purpose of the Sentinel at Mars was now paramount. Finally, after its long cruise, Star Eater arrived at Mars. The world watched, breathless, as the first, low-resolution images from its approach cameras were transmitted back to Earth. There it was, not a fuzzy dot, but a clear, defined object. It was not a smooth, aerodynamic craft. It was angular, crystalline, and asymmetrical, a complex lattice of dark, non-reflective material. It had no visible engines, no antennas, no solar panels. It was utterly, profoundly alien. As Star Eater began its careful, slow approach for a closer inspection, the alien Sentinel did something that no one had anticipated. It turned to face the incoming probe, and it sent a signal, not to its mothership, but directly at Star Eater. It was a simple, focused beam of energy. It wasn't a weapon. It was a message. Back on Earth, the data from Star Eater, which had been streaming in, abruptly stopped. The link went dead. The controllers at JPL frantically tried to re-establish contact, sending commands, boosting their transmission power. There was nothing, just silence. Star Eater, our first emissary to the visitor, our first attempt to bridge the gap, was gone. It hadn't been destroyed. The last telemetry data showed no damage, no explosion. It had simply been turned off. The alien Sentinel had looked at our best technology and, with a whisper of energy, had silenced it completely. The message was now terrifyingly clear. We were allowed to watch. We were allowed to listen. But we were not allowed to get closer. The Sentinel at Mars was not there for a conversation. It was there as a gatekeeper. And we had just been denied entry. The silence from Mars was no longer passive. It was an active, enforced boundary. And we were on the outside, looking in, with more questions than ever, and a new, chilling fear of what would happen if we tried to cross that boundary again. If you followed this story to its chilling conclusion, it means you're someone who isn't afraid to look into the abyss, to ask the hard questions, and to confront the profound mysteries of our existence. That kind of courage and curiosity deserves to be amplified. Please, if this journey has meant something to you, help this channel grow by subscribing and hitting the like button. It tells the platforms that this kind of thinking is valuable and needs to be shared. And now, for those of you who have stayed until the very end, I want you to go to the comments and write the phrase, "The boundary has been set." Because that is the new reality we face. We are no longer masters of our own solar system. A line has been drawn, and we have been warned not to cross it. Thank you for your attention. And be sure to watch the next video, where we will explore what humanity's next move could possibly be. The story is far from over.